So cool how you can stream like this. Setting up. I'm just going to confirm it on my phone. So cool how you can stream like this. Setting up. All right. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. It is officially 2021. 2020 was an interesting one. And today's presentation is Hindsight is 2020. I'm Dr. Brett Gilbert. I'm joined by a great friend, colleague, someone who I really trust and really just have so much respect for, Dr. Jeff Wittmus. And we both practice here in Chicago. I'm an endodontist. Jeff is what I would call a super GP, general dentist. Someone who can truly do it all, really studies everything, and has a really amazing comprehensive outlook and approach to dentistry. So the reason that we're here is because we've been talking quite a bit through the COVID months and leading into the new year that there is so much information out there that doctors and really especially dentists need to know. And especially as we sort of are coming out of 2020, maybe feeling like the light is at the end of the tunnel, Dr. Wittmus wants to really dive into a greater understanding of how we all still need to be very much on a state of preparedness for what's to come this year. We're going to dive into a number of different topics related to the year in review, what dentists need to know. We're going to touch base on COVID in regards to at-home testing and vaccination information. So just a wide-ranging topic spread today, this morning. And really the goal is that this is for us a piece of service. And we really are very, very passionate about service. We are going to have a part 2 today to this presentation, and that is going to really be devoted and focused on service. So I want to introduce Dr. Jeff Wittmus. Again, he practices here in Chicago. He's a dear friend of mine, a colleague. We've been together through organized dentistry. I'm grateful I get to work with him and his patients in my practice. Through the COVID months, he really stood up as a guardian angel for me. In the very early days when things were really dark and there was so much uncertainty, I was not prepared in any way with PPE. And this gentleman right here delivered me a care package to my office, including N95 masks. It truly allowed me to move forward with confidence and to express and display a sense of certainty and faith to my staff and my team that allowed us to continue to practice without ever closing through the COVID months. So I want to always just acknowledge him for that. He knows that it meant so much to me. And we've talked a lot about an opportunity to come together and collaborate in terms of service. So what better way to do it than to kick off 2021? I want to introduce my friend, my colleague, my mate, Dr. Jeff Wittmus. Jeff, welcome, happy new year. And, help us, man, help us understand where we've been, where we're headed, and what we all really, really need to know.
Brett, I don't know if there's been a year I've been happier to get behind us than this one. 2020, in my own personal description, was a complete and utter beatdown from the start to finish. It's just been unrelenting. I think that we have an opportunity here on New Year's Day 2021 going forward to kind of look and what did we learn? What have we learned from 2020? I would say enormous amounts of information. And look, I'm going to rapid fire go through a lot of things that everybody should be aware of or at least look into. Most of you watching have been on an unprecedented number of podcasts, webinars, virtual learning, e-learning. I don't think I've ever done that much e-learning in my life during the period of time from April to June. And I'm going to recap a lot of things that we have learned from some of our great mentors. You and I have a common mentor, Cliff Ruddle, and shout out to Cliff, who's amazing. He does the Ruddle Show, and you guys did a podcast where it was really helpful to disseminate information from the internet and the TV and misinformation, disinformation. It was really hard to sort out. I think hindsight is 2020. So let's talk about what we learned. I think there's no question about the fact that being a dentist means having the ability to treat and manage pain and infection. And so if you're a younger dentist, take some advice and make sure that you do as much CE as you possibly can in certain areas. As Howard Ferran likes to call it, blood and guts. In other words, extracting teeth and doing endodontics when someone's in pain or having an infection is critical to the success of your practice. If somebody walks in with pain or swelling and you don't have the ability to treat that patient, you're selling yourself short as a dentist. I think pain management this year came to the forefront. Some of the other things that we know for sure that we have seen amongst all the profession of dentistry is we've seen a lot more bruxism. We've seen a lot of cracked teeth, facial pain. There's definitely a component of stress that has been unprecedented this year for everybody. Anxiety and stress have played its role in causing destruction in the head and neck. So, taking some courses about how to treat TMJ and bruxism, I'm not going to get into specifics. We're just going to talk about, NTI appliance, full coverage, whether you're using Vivera retainers with bite ramps, it doesn't matter. Just keeping the teeth separated in physiologic rest position to give the temporomandibular joint an anatomical resting position, keeping forces off of teeth with malocclusion or with large amalgams. We've seen a lot of fractures, a lot of facial pain. We've done a lot of different things with splints. People have joked about putting on some weight during the quarantine periods and not getting out and doing their exercise. Obstructive sleep apnea is something that you should take CE classes in and try to be able to manage those patients. Something a little bit more strange, and as I rapid fire through this, Brett, there's more information on my website at gratefuldental.com. We have a COVID-19 tab with all kinds of information on it, how to stay healthy and antivirus proof your body, how to make a mask at home. My wife's gotten pretty proficient at making a mask. And if you go through the proper, thread count of certain materials, you can get it up to a level 2. And we'll talk about masks in a little bit. If you were to stay profitable this year, you would have to be able to do one visit crowns. Would be very helpful in minimizing chair time. I think that we've seen something called mask mouth, and the periodontists can talk about this a little bit, but we've seen an increase in periodontal tissue inflammation. We attribute this to rebreathing carbon dioxide. Maybe there's a lot of anaerobic microbugs that don't need oxygen. Those tend to be the most lethal to bone and tissue. And we're not sure if that has something to do with it, but we're definitely seeing some dry mouth. There's some things on the website about how to protect yourself from mask mouth, like AO gel and other types of hydration and other things like that. I think that you need to definitely keep yourself healthy. We've been under a lot of pressure this year, seeing emergencies and with all the new protocols that we'll get into in a little bit, things have changed in the office. And I think that's for the better. I mean, you and I have done a lot of things in our offices, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I think it's a good idea to take a look at the numbers. When you and I were speaking in February about how to get prepared for this, your eyes were popping out of your head. So
I sure were.
I don't want to mislead people to think that I'm smarter than everybody or I knew more than everybody. When we get into our part 2 about service, one of the things about having a dental clinic halfway around the world is that you deal with a lot of different people in the intelligence community to try to get medical and dental supplies to remote areas of the world. And that community of people knew what was going on well before the American public did. And And so, I had an opportunity to try to get myself and my office ready, and also reach out to my colleagues to let them know that, hey, man, this is coming and there's nothing's going to stop it. And it's going to be pretty crazy. So why has this particular virus, SARS-CoV-2, been such a problem for everyone this year? Well, the first problem is that 42%, and a lot of these numbers come from the University of Illinois, who's been able to create some data collection over the last 9 months. So we certainly know more than we did in March. On March 16th, the announcement of dentists closing their office was made by the American Dental Association, asking us to only treat emergencies. And they definitely spelled out what that means. It also called on aerosol generating procedures as very high risk, and changes were made with OSHA as far as risk categories for employees. This created a lot of issues, and it made for dentistry to have to do some changes. About 97, and these numbers are coming from either Dental Products Report or Dental Economics. 97% of all dental offices were closed to everything but emergency. That's pretty amazing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics say 503,000 dental office jobs were lost during the pandemic shutdown. But after reopening, we've only had less than 1% of dental personnel contract COVID. So what does that tell me, Brett? That tells me that we're doing a very effective job of minimizing cross-contamination and making it a safe environment for not only our patients, but just as important, if not more important, our staff and ourselves. There was a lot of uncertainty, and certainly amongst the hygiene community, there was a group of hygienists that have been doing it a long time that may have a age or health risk issue and didn't come back to work. So, I think that we all had a problem with shortage of PPE, which you already mentioned. According to what I'm looking at here, 65 foreign manufacturers of N95s were pulled for offering protection levels far below 95%. So we were getting a lot of products that weren't reviewed by the FDA. The ones that I brought you that you referred to were high-end 3M surgical masks with lot numbers and were certainly authentic. But not knowing if what you're wearing is protecting you was very scary. About 99.7%, according to the JADA, implemented enhanced infection control procedures. So while there might be a couple people out there that didn't do anything different, I think almost every dentist made some changes. We're going to talk about that. Dental Products said that there was 153 new products that appeared on its pages. That's pretty amazing. I want to talk, before I get into the clinical changes we made, it's so important to have a great staff. I mean, my staff was absolutely amazing, and we bonded together as a team. Natalia, who was on the left, was basically the face of our practice, manning the phones, emailing, texting patients during the shutdown, checking on elderly, making sure people always had the updated information through our website. We have a unique office, and I'll get into why the structure itself is unique. But the other thing that's unique is that the girl on my right in the picture is Dr. Maureen Calderon, and she is a dentist who graduated from Northwestern with me in 1991 and has handled all the periodontal therapy and treatment in my office. She's not a periodontist, but certainly can handle that portion of the practice. And we've worked together, and having a dentist be your hygiene person eliminated the need for me to do a hygiene check and change gowns. And we'll get into some of our protocols with what we wear. On my left is Lauren Geraci, who's been with me for over 20 years. And she completely helped me remodel and revamp the entire office to make it more sterilizable and reduce cross-contamination. On the far right, or on my left, is Annie. Annie Middleton is kind of my right-hand person who handled just about everything that needed to be done as far as running and coordinating the office. Having a great staff, attracting, finding, training incredible people and retaining them is probably the biggest thing that I could recommend to any dental office, but you guys already know that. So on that note, I'm looking at dental economics from November, where one of their reports indicated only 27% of dental providers fully paid their staff during shutdown, and 28% to 49%, which is quite a wide range, paid no staff at all. So, you know, whether or not you got the PPP loan, which we'll talk about in a minute, is critical. And according to these statistics, only about half of dentists received the PPP loan. So it's correlated in that the people who didn't get that PPP loan are the same doctors who couldn't afford to pay their staff. So I think Congress's intentions played true. And so I want to quickly go into some things about that. I think that the PPP loan for a lot of people was a saving grace to keep their great team together. There's been a lot of changes to the PPP, and they keep changing the rules as we go. The goalposts keep moving, as they say. If you're not familiar with the CARES Act, I would try to familiarize yourself with it. The Family Care Act is something that basically, if your staff were to contract COVID at home or at the grocery store, wherever, not necessarily in your office, and was caused to quarantine at home, you'd be responsible to pay that person during their time off. Now that sounds like, oh man, how am I going to do that if my whole staff is on quarantine? Well, the Family Care Act is basically a pass-through by the government. So whatever you pay out to these people on leave comes off your payroll taxes. So these are the type of things that you need to discuss with a great team of people. If you don't have, for young dentists out of school, if you don't have a lawyer or a CPA or a certified financial planner, these are people that you need on your team. I mean, I have 3 different accountants that do different things, whether it's a 5,500 for 401k, safe harbor, or whether it's day-to-day legal stuff like tax planning. You need a tax accountant. I also have a forensic accountant, which helps me consolidate for QuickBooks and do other types of things like trust planning and that type of thing. So you need a team of experts on your side. We're dentists and we tend to be do-it-yourselfers, but I think that you have to reach out to the professional community. You need a CPA who's familiar with dental practice. You need somebody who can help you manage your retirement money. As you can tell, the landscape can change quickly, and planning for your future is very important. From a legal aspect, you need to touch base with your malpractice carrier. You know, when we were shut down, there was a lot of information on the internet. I use Pick Wisconsin, and that's also now called Assurant. That information I can get to people. It definitely helped me generate consent forms. We developed a consent form that would allow us to see patients, understanding that there was a possible risk of contracting COVID and not depending on the government to protect us from a liability standpoint, I think is critical so that you don't get yourself in a situation where somebody caught it at the gas station and then went in for a dental visit and said they got it at your office. So, you know, early on, I had told you, Brett, that I was absolutely amazed by the new technology that was being advanced, namely Bill Gates, who spent $100 billion on DNA tracing technology. basically what that means is anybody who contracts SARS-CoV-2 virus or COVID-19, which is the symptoms of that virus, kind of like HIV causes AIDS. I think that those patients need to know that there's a risk. And I don't know if you came up with a consent form, Brett, that you use in your office.
Yeah.
And did you use your malpractice carrier to develop that, or did you come up with that on your own?
No, it was something that was handed down to me from some of the other dentists in the community. And I had it vetted by a number of different colleagues, and I had one attorney look at it. No one could give me a sure thing that it would be completely like a blanket of coverage, but it certainly was very descriptive with the same spirit in mind, just to say that there's no way that we're going to be able to fully understand if you develop COVID, if you caught the virus here at our office or somewhere else. So we have to just before we start treatment, have you understand that. And I never had one patient fail to sign it or really show any risk. I think there was pretty much a general consensus that you could pretty much pick this up anywhere, and that the people that were wrapped up like bananas in my office probably weren't going to be the ones to give it to you.
Yeah, I think that dentistry has really come to the forefront as far as controlling that. But the DNA tracing technology is absolutely mind-boggling. If they did get COVID-19 symptoms, we would be able to tell exactly who gave it to them, which has been critical to try to stop the spread. One of the things that the CARES Act has done is given them some ability to change. And so a lot's changed in the last week, which I want to cover real quick before we go into clinical stuff. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 kind of spells out some of those details about liability and other types of things. And I would familiarize yourself with it through your team of advisors or on the internet. As far as PPP, we just got some really good news on this last thing that passed Congress. Expenses will be deductible on your federal tax returns. That's huge, because originally there was some concern that a lot of the major corporations who only accounted for about 15% of the PPP loans, but 80% of the money. Now think about that for a second. We didn't want them to go without paying taxes, but on second thought, I think that what they did was they made the states handle it individually, but the federal tax returns will not consider the PPP forgiveness as income. It's also going to have a second round of PPP, which is 25% greater reduction in revenue in any 2020 calendar quarter compared to 2019. You'd be eligible for another round. So keep that in mind as you do your end of tax planning. The other thing is that I've had a lot of bankers contact me in December trying to get me to do the forgiveness application through the bank. Now they have a vested interest in getting us to apply for forgiveness right away. And I went in and met with my banker, and you need to have some kind of personal contact with your bank to try to manage these things. Some banks were more helpful than others. Hopefully that you have a good relationship with your bank. But I flat out told them that no dentist is going to want to apply for this before January 1st, 2021. Now, why did I say that? Well, we're all pretty much on a cash basis accounting, not accrual basis. And so we definitely wanted to close our books without any of the forgiveness information being put out before they actually finalize these rules that they keep changing. And so sure enough, 2 weeks after I met with them and told them, don't expect a call back from any of your dentist clients. And he understood what I was saying and was thankful that I at least advised him why no one's calling him back that's a dentist. And they did change the rules. So now that we have further guidance, I would continue to look for more guidance. But these things are very, very important. If your PPP loan was less than $150,000, which would be 90% of the dentists who receive PPP loans, You only have to certify that you spent the funds in accordance with the rules and provide the number of jobs you retained because of the loan received. You just need to keep your records for audit. It's going to be a one-page application that's very simple. You won't have to download those 941s and have your accountant figure out how to send the proper documents through the DocuSign, through the SBA. So, all of those things are important. And I think that knowing what the current rules are can really help you manage your financial situation. The other thing that they were going to do is they were going to deduct the EIDL and the HHS stimulus, which both were additional grant money that was given out. Many of you got $10,000, or it was an equivalent of how many employees you had, give or take. So it might be different for some people out there. They're going to not only give you full forgiveness for that, but they're not going to deduct it off of the forgiveness for the PPP. That's significant, because whatever let's say it's 100,000 that you have on the PPP, if they were going to take off 25,000 for the EIDL and the HHS stimulus package that you received, you won't have to pay those back, and it's not going to be deducted off your forgiveness. So you can add that on to your forgiveness. So now maybe it's 125,000 that you're going to not have to pay back. Also, if any of you took SBA loans, you'll notice that you were sent possibly money that you didn't know you applied for. This threw people for a loop back when the HHS stimulus went to round 2, but never made it to round 3. And all of a sudden, this money showed up in your account. And what they did was, if you had qualified and received the EIDL, you automatically got the phase 2 for HHS. So anybody out there that didn't do their accounting or reconciliation of the books, if there's money in there, you don't know where it came from, you might want to look into the HHS stimulus package that you thought you didn't finish the application for, but really phase 3 didn't start until recently. And there's additional money with that if you want to look into it. I hope I didn't go too fast. Brett, are you aware of all these things? There's an extension on the paid sick leave for family leave, tax credits, other stuff. So I hope that helps people to at least have some information to take back to their accountant and kind of look at these things.
By all means. No, I think it's incredible, because I think especially as the year was turning to a close, everyone's so focused on, personal, ending the year personally, ending the year in the office and professionally. A lot of these things came very quickly. And along with so much information on vaccination, I think it was very easy to get lost in some of the minutia. So this is a huge help. Great review.
All right. And not only that, but we'll get into the vaccines and all that stuff later. I want to talk about another topic that many dentists have their pants down on. And I don't mean to be funny, but let's talk about cybersecurity for a minute. I don't think that there's ever been a higher cybersecurity risk in the history of the world than now. Everybody's working remotely. They have moved a lot of the servers off site. There's been a lot of rapid changes in cybersecurity. If you have not looked at cybersecurity with an IT rep or anybody, you really need to look into this. And I'll tell you why. It's been a rough year for every dentist, but there's one thing that could push you over the edge and push you possibly into bankruptcy, even if you're a great dentist with a great staff, and that's ransomware. If you're not aware of what ransomware is, it's where they lock up your computer and ask for money. Now, there's a history that I won't get into too much, but they have been hitting dentists hard in the last 18 months. And they normally hit servers that are doing functions while the staff is not there. And they typically hit on holidays. They hit last Christmas Eve, they hit last New Year's Eve, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving Day, New Year's Day. And so if you leave your server on, you need to really look at, do you have what is properly needed to protect your server and your data? It's a computer virus, and it can cause all kinds of HIPAA violations and a lot of costs. So when they first started sending out ransomware, they would ask the people that they stole the stuff from, like for instance, they hit the Wisconsin Dental Association mothership for the recommended ransomware and cyber threat security company. So they were able to get 200 or 250 dentists simultaneously with ransomware. Everybody paid $1,000 and they made some good money. The next time they did such a thing, they wanted 10,000. And last New Year's Eve, some dentists in New York and in Colorado got hit for 25,000. So what they're doing is they're finding the limit that you will write a check and not say, screw it, I'm going to start from scratch. That's too much money. And so the cost of recouping your data is going up and up. And when they want Bitcoin the next day, it's pretty hard to get. So you guys, everybody take a look at their cybersecurity, protect yourself against ransomware, check your firewalls. I think a lot of dentists have inadequate firewalls, whether they're being told by Patterson or by Shine that they have the inability to turn the security up on the firewalls and not cause problems with your software. That's what they told us, and that didn't turn out to be true. So you really need an IT person that's not affiliated with your software to take a look. Not doing proper backups, not having a backup off site. You know, I think that I have been looking for 5 years for an underwriter to do cyber liability insurance. And I did get travelers to underwrite that in case of our hard drive being stolen or our data being physically taken or ransomware or whatever. So you can get some coverage. I would call your malpractice, see if they can put a rider on for cyber liability insurance. You can always try to shut your server down and not do these functions during times when you're not going to be needing it, like on holidays or most likely time that everyone would know that you're closed, and check your firewalls. So, you know, I think that all of that's super important, and we won't get into too many details about all that stuff. But it does bring me to another thing about OSHA. So OSHA required that everybody get recertified this year. Whether you're talking about, well, back in March, we were talking about checking employees before every patient to make sure that the N95s were properly fitted. As you can tell, they waived that. Some of us having done hospital dentistry, we were grandfathered in on the fit checking, but there was a lot of controversy over that. And so, you know, we learned a lot about masks, didn't we? We learned a lot about protecting ourselves. Me personally, I learned that doing yoga and staying flexible with my lower back was really helpful when, you know, things got a little hectic at the office. You tend to leave your ergonomics. Now, you guys use microscopes, so you can't really change your ergonomics, and that's really good for you guys physically. Yeah. I think that, you know, if you haven't updated your, what we call it the SARS-CoV-2 infectious disease preparedness and response plan. It is considered an addendum to the bloodborne pathogen exposure control plan, all of which can be obtained from the ADA. So if I'm talking stuff and you don't know what I'm talking about, you can call the ADA or go online right now and get their OSHA compliance kit. You can walk yourself through it step by step and do everything that you need to get into compliance. There's also a kit that the ADA sells for HIPAA. And I think now is a great time, if you haven't done it this year, to make sure that you're in compliance with HIPAA. Go through the kit, again, step by step, dedicate a staff member to making sure everybody's in compliance. These are all things that, in addition to the new safety and materials exposure, safety data needs to be on site, that needs to be updated. I think that, you know, want to make sure that if all of this stuff got lost in the shuffle, that you get on it at least now to get yourself to where you need to be, because I think this year more than ever is going to be making sure you get your ducks in a row. Mm-hmm. Besides HIPAA compliance, you know, I think that making sure that your staff understands all this stuff will really help you be more prepared for screening patients. So without pausing too much, Brett, let's get into all the changes that we made in our office. You know, I sat down with the staff and I tried to collect all the different things that we're doing that we think was helpful during this unprecedented shutdown. First and foremost, for the last 20 years, it's been one of my pet peeves to go out at lunch and see another dental staff person in their scrubs that they were just wearing in the office. We've always laundered our gowns on site. We wear surgical scrubs and they remain on site and are laundered in our facility. No one's allowed to leave with their clinical scrubs. They're not allowed to work in street clothes. We use autoclavable clogs and Crocs that can be sprayed down with bleach at the end of the day. We wear our street clothes in and we change in a strict environment. We're very lucky to have 2 floors to our office. And so we can separate the clinical area from our personal break area, lab area, that type of thing. And so what we've done is we've got gowns that go over our scrubs. We wear surgical caps that are washed. We launder our gowns after every patient. So starting with what you're wearing, I think it's important to not cross-contaminate between patients. If you're doing a scaling and root planing on a patient and you get aerosol on your scrubs, and then you sterilize the room and do everything you can to mitigate the chair being the source of cross-contamination, your scrubs right by the patient's head where they're breathing could cause cross-contamination. So please think about layering. We've done a lot of things. The main thing I think everyone did was we don't have a waiting room anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we ask that patients call us when they arrive, or text us and let us know that they're ready. And we screen 1 patient at a time to come into the office. And that way we're able to keep patients separated. And as you know, my office is small. We've got about 720 square feet. And so we immediately made structural changes. During the shutdown, I put in new walls, new ceilings, new floors in the operatories. We got new dental equipment that was more sterilizable. If you don't have contained bottled water, I think that you need to have those on the units. We obviously use barriers and disposables, whether it's air water tips, suction tips. We sleeve the chair with a disposable sleeve. You and I were both on the cleaning, surgically clean air units before pre-pandemic. The Jade has been amazing. It's still the top surgical air cleaner. I know you have a Cascade, which covers more area.
I have a Cascade and 2 Jades now.
Yeah, fantastic. So
Yeah.
we're basically turning over all the air in our office and purifying it every 5 minutes. On top of that, we installed UV lights on the HVAC unit. So any air that goes through our ductwork is being zapped by UV lights. And, people might wonder, well, does that really work? UV lights? And so UV sterilizers eliminate 99% of pathogens from surfaces by penetrating microscopic organisms and destroying their acid. And that comes from Patterson itself and a reprint from a journal. We also use these UV boxes in the screening area. My waiting room is now a screening area. And so when the office has been sterilized and ready to get the next patient in, they come in the door with a mask, of course. And then we not only temperature screen them, we do O2 sats, because I think that temperature isn't a great indicator of contagion, but O2 sats have been shown, and we'll get into a little bit more of that stuff. But anything that they're going to bring into my operatory, whether it be a phone, keys, the mask that they're wearing, a credit card or method of payment, whether it's a check or cash, it all goes into a UV box, and we sterilize that so that when we bring it in the operatory, we're not bringing in anything in there that I don't know is already sterile. Now, at the very beginning, we were bagging people's hats, coats, backpacks, purses. Luggage wasn't allowed in. We have not had a rep inside my office. We have not had a delivery person in my office. All deliveries come to the back door, whether it's UPS, FedEx, mail, everything. Nobody comes in unless they've been pre-screened and we know who it is and what we're going to be doing. So I think from the clinical standpoint, there is a lot of things that we have changed. We mentioned the on-site laundry. Unfortunately, if you're in a big office building, your landlord might not make it possible for you to vent a dryer so that you can actually do laundry on site. There are services that do this for you. I don't know the costs and whatnot because we don't do that, but I think it's worth looking into. I think that getting your inventory in order is important. And we'll talk about PPE in a few minutes. But as you know, Brett, necessity is the mother of all inventions. So what other kind of crazy things did we implement? Well, we put up plexiglass around the front desk. We initially had shower curtains affixed to the operatory door entrances. So once the operatory was sterilized, we sealed that operatory off with Velcro and plastic, which got sterilized and changed. Now, we also made it possible to move to a negative pressure room if we needed to. Thank God it didn't turn to that. I mean, you and I had some conversations in March about negative pressure eye protection, and thank God we didn't get into that realm. But I think that at least you need to look at your ventilation. It's all about airflow. We talked about some of the critical points, whether it be a jade or we installed aerosol evacuators in front of our chairs, which have these big, huge cones and a 7-layer HIPAA. I think we use Aegis. And this takes up a lot of the aerosol that does get generated. They have Vita Shield. There's a lot of crazy different types of machinery that you can use to evacuate the aerosols, in addition to the surgically clean air unit and the HVAC UV stuff. So it is about airflow. It is about pulling that potential aerosol away from the patient and not towards the screening area, the front desk, the sterilization area. So take a look at all that. I learned a lot about airflow and that type of thing. I think that, some of these things are pretty amazing. When we talk about masks, you and I have had a lot of conversations about masks, but from the data I just gave you, I'm 100% confident that what we are wearing with the addition of a level 3 surgical mask or an N95 with a face shield and or eye protection, which is sealed around the sides, and again, a sterilizable cap would all suffice with proper hand washing and that type of thing. I think making sure that you don't cross-contaminate, and I'm going to get into some of that stuff in a minute, because there's a lot of things that we didn't think about, and we certainly do now. We put in new counters, the walls, the ceilings, the floors are all very sterilizable, like an operating room. The mobile carts can be moved in and out and sterilized, and everything in the drawer is encased. Everything out of the drawer is sealed. We basically make up all the kits in a sealed container beforehand, and so nothing that wasn't used is exposed. So that's important too, I think. I think that, the UV bags were helpful, but I also think that the way that we screen the patients was important. One of the new things that came out of dentistry is video appointments. If you're not currently doing video appointments with your patients, now I don't know if that's practical for an endodontist, but for a general dentist who's trying to mitigate, okay, what is going on with the patient? Is it something that I can handle? Is it something that should be referred out? Is it something that just needs a prescription and might be able to wait? And trying to gather as much information before the patient actually enters your office, I think is critical. We did learn a lot that diagnosis is important, but let's face it, we don't want to waste chair time. So basically what we do is a pre-screening, which we use DocuSign. So, you know, if you have let's say a new patient has an emergency, I don't know this person. So how am I supposed to screen them? Most of my patients I've known for decades. So I know their situation. I know what's going on with them. I know the ones that are afraid, the ones that don't want to wear a mask. I know all the different personalities. But if it's a new patient, what we do is we send out a new patient form via DocuSign. Once that comes back, we reach out to try to get the former provider or mutual providers' latest radiographs. Now I have all the patient information, medical history, dental history. I have the x-rays. We now set up a video appointment. That video appointment we run through Invisalign. Invisalign has an encrypted site, a lot of layers of security. They set everything up for you. You do a Zoom call, just like we're doing now. Try to evaluate in 5 or 10 minutes what's going on with the patient, and then understand that when they come in, you have a plan. You know, this idea of having walk-ins and emergencies where you take a look, take an x-ray, figure out what's going on, and then make an appointment. I have to know exactly how much time I need in the chair to accomplish what the patient and I decide that we want to accomplish at that visit. We also try to combine restorative and hygiene appointments so that if you're getting, let's say you broke a tooth, you need a one-day crown, I'm going to get you in, I'm going to numb you up. I'm going to scan you. I'm going to prepare the tooth, scan you with my prime scan. I'm going to send it to the prime mill. I'm going to start milling that crown out, and I'm going to fit it, and then I'm going to give it over to my staff who's been trained in master ceramics through Scottsdale Spear Education. And they're going to start working on it. It takes about 25 minutes before I can glue it in, 30 minutes. So I immediately go back upstairs and do the hygiene appointment. At the end of the appointment, I cement the crown, and now the patient doesn't have to have a temporary, doesn't have to have an impression, goo in their mouth, gag maybe. Maybe the impression margins aren't good. Maybe the lab can't see the margins because it was bleeding, because they got mask mouth, or they haven't flossed in 9 months, whatever it is. Everybody's in a strange situation. But now I know on my screen whether that is a good scan, and I can finish the case. Now the patient doesn't need to come back, doesn't need a plastic temporary for 2 weeks, doesn't have a potential for an emergency with that. I don't have to renumb them up to glue it in. So all of these things helped us change the way that we do our office. We also, for existing patients, would send a pre-authorization to insurance company prior to their visit. And one of the biggest changes that we were able to make in my office is we don't do billing anymore. We find out ahead of time how much the visit's going to cost. We were eliminated. We were, well, we'll get into that in a minute, but we were able to figure out the exact patient portion for their visit, take the payment from the UV sterilizing bag in the screening room to the front desk, run the payment, have the patient sign the documents before creating any aerosol or starting a procedure. The CDC recommended this, but it's very difficult to implement that type of system unless you have a good staff, unless your patients trust you, and whether you know ahead of time what you're going to do and what the insurance is going to pay. So having your staff take time to do this through e-claims or pre-authorizations to document what the insurance company is promising to pay, it reduces the need to bill people. It also increases your cash flow. And as we found out this year, cash is king, right?
For sure.
Now, we also have kind of figured out that our biggest overhead, Brett, is not all the equipment we put in. It's not even our payroll. It is the network adjustments from PPOs. Now, I know there's a lot of young dentists out there, and believe me, you got to pick your poison. We picked Blue Cross Blue Shield for one reason and one reason only, because they're the insurance for first responders in Chicago. And since we're in the city of Chicago, it's all my firemen, my police officers, my city workers. And although they're 60% off my fee in general, that's a huge cut on your overhead. And when you're spending all this money to implement these new protocols and PPE, for instance, I like to wear these level 3 surgical masks that I'm very fond of, with extra breathing room and a tight fit 4-ply, very nice. They've been on back order since February. They've also gone from $8 a box to $98 a box. The cost of PPE is 25 to 60% increased across the board, whether it's surgical gowns, masks, gloves. We couldn't get medium gloves for a while because I didn't realize that 85% of all the world's gloves are made by one giant conglomerate that bought up all these small companies. And when they had 3/4 of their workforce exposed to COVID, they shut down, and they hadn't even caught up to the demand of all these people that are not providers, healthcare providers, wearing gloves now, that there's certainly going to be a shortage throughout the year. So stock up accordingly. I think that a lot of us at the beginning, we're talking about PPE fees. And just because I missed this in the legal segment, I wanted to remind everybody that that was perfectly fine to even bill the insurance company. Now, we did finally get Blue Cross Blue Shield reimbursement of a small amount. And so we got all these checks from everyone from the summer. Now, September 1st, I stopped charging the PPE fee. Why? Because there was a legal case that has shown precedent that it is illegal to charge patients an additional PPE fee. What does that mean? Well, each state is different, but you want to make sure that you're within your right, depending on where your the different insurance companies' headquarters are, within your right to bill the insurance for PPE. What I would recommend to everybody at this point, if you haven't done it already, roll the PPE fee into your fees. No one is going to say, wow, I can't believe you raised your fees. I think everyone is aware that the cost of providing safe dental care has gone up. And so if you're still doing a PPE fee, I would very seriously consider getting rid of it. I think that is a legal thing to talk with your advisors, but certainly it brings me to something else, which is trying to mitigate risk. So we send out a pre-screening questionnaire, and that pre-screening questionnaire goes out through DocuSign so that we can get a read on the patient before their appointment. Now, if somebody has been in contact with somebody, obviously you want to know that. I paid particular attention to the testing, asking lots of questions. What type of test was it? How did they do the testing? What was your result? I also asked a lot of questions about symptoms. And what I realized is we had hundreds of people that we knew or were patients or friendly or family that had this in December and January and February. And while I may have had an inkling about what was going on, they weren't diagnosing these people. They are not considered COVID positive. And we're still uncertain about the antibody situation, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I also think that people are pretty confident that the loss of taste or smell or the permanent cough or other symptoms that they experienced, which no one knew what it was, they were pretty sure that they had it. And so I was maintaining that the virus had been here since early November. And now I have been vindicated because they have some data from blood drives conducted in November of last year that they have people with antibodies that had their blood drawn from SARS-CoV-2 in 9 different states. So there was hundreds of people that were contracting this and catching it back then. And so that's why I say we've learned a lot about mitigating risk. We talked about a lot about masks, and you know, a level 1, level 2 mask is not going to protect you in an aerosol generating environment. So I had a couple colleagues that were still using level 1 masks, and I pleaded with them to change. And I think that almost everybody now has upgraded their masks. A lot of the staff had a difficulty breathing in an N95. I don't know about you, Brett, but I think your body equilibrates to it.
Yeah,
You know,
there were some times in the summer it was a little hard, but I've accommodated very well.
yeah. And if they are N95s like I have gifted to you, which have a ventilation nozzle on the outside, those are disposable. You can't re-sterilize those. And so I wanted to be clear about that. The KN95s you have to be careful with. I just mentioned there's quite a few manufacturers who are not FDA approved. So, you know, do your research or buy something adequate. You know, besides doing the questionnaire by DocuSign and trying to assess the risk, we didn't take any chances. So if there was any possibility that I thought that the patient might be a risk, let's say a flight attendant who travels a lot or whatever, we tried to mitigate our risk for our staff. I think that getting rid of our PPO networks, amazingly, Brett, our production went way down, but our bottom line stayed the same, which is something that you need to crunch the numbers. You need to know your numbers. That's what Howard Fran always says. And I don't think there's any question that you need to look into that. You know, communicating with your patients by email, text is imperative. Having them be able to communicate with you via email, text, or voicemail is really critical to keeping those communication lines open. But I think one of the biggest changes that we did clinically, and I'm sure you're doing it as well, is we use a pre-rinse. We use a pre-rinse before starting, and I don't think that's something a lot of people were doing. Now, I learned a lot from one of my mentors, Dr. Mish, who's not with us, and he always had a different infection control plan for placing implants. Placing implants, we would always drape everything and bouffant caps, iodine scrubs, Paradox pre-rinse. But I think now we're rinsing everybody, no matter what we're doing. Even if we're just talking to the patient, taking an x-ray, you do a pre-rinse. There was a lot of confusion in the spring. And I think that we have settled on a chlorhexidine rinse for 30 seconds. Dr. Rella Christensen says to do the 30-second chlorhexidine rinse twice. Early on, they said hydrogen peroxide, but as you know, that can change the flora of your mouth if overused. And so knowing how to dilute it or how to not overuse it, it also caused the patients to not really like that taste in their mouth. Plus, it doesn't provide much help after you start working, where chlorhexidine has some kind of effect for a longer period of time. It's been shown to be effective. I even was on a webinar with a well-known group, the Coyce Center out of New York, who was advocating rinsing with sodium hypochlorite. Now, while that might kill COVID or SARS-CoV-2 virus particles, I'm sure it does. It kills probably everything. I was very adamant about them putting it in their own mouth and not giving it to a patient if they didn't want to get punched in the face. So that was pretty short-lived. I think a lot of people tried a lot of different stuff. I don't think that there's any question that there's different rinses out there that work, but do your homework and definitely pre-rinse everybody going forward for any kind of dental work to mitigate pathogens of any kind being aerosolized.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The other thing that we did maybe 6 or 7 years ago, which is very helpful, is membership programs. So if you don't have a loyalty program, and you can't call it insurance without filing with the state, but you can certainly have a membership program. Maybe a lot of people lost their benefits from the pandemic. Maybe longtime patients don't have dental benefits anymore. Maybe they retired. Maybe they are disabled. But you can offer some type of plan that covers, I mean, ours covers all their emergencies, their radiographs, their exams, their cleanings, their preventative care. We have different packages, whether you have periodontal, whether you're a senior or a veteran or a kid, and there are different pricing tier per month. So it keeps patients from maybe not coming in knowing that they've already prepaid for the services. And then we give, 20, 25% off to any kind of procedures that are done, kind of like what the insurance companies are doing. Yet we're controlling our costs. They're paying the money to us instead of having this unused premium. The ADA said a few years ago that 60% of all people that carry dental benefits in the United States pay more in premium, co-insurance, and deductible than the actual market share value or market value of the services. So that's pretty crazy if you think about it. There's a lot of people paying premiums that are not getting their money's worth. And, all of these changes were made, but, some of the things that might have got missed, Brett, and this is going back to dental economics from my good friend and longtime mentor, Gordon Christensen. It's hard to believe, Brett, that I was on a Mediterranean cruise with Dr. Christensen and some of our other mentor colleagues. I took my parents for the first time to Europe because they had never been. And my dad has COPD, he's 80, former smoker, emphysema, type negative, A negative blood, 2 months with a rare pneumonia that finally someone at University of Chicago was able to treat. So this is the highest risk category. And we're running around in Europe, July of 2019. And it's hard to believe that 3 months later, everything has gone upside down. And one of the things that Dr. Christensen and his wife, who's a PhD in microbiology and a former hygienist who's a forefront of infection control, she said, don't forget about the things that you don't think about. So let's talk about them. Curing lights. Do you completely sleeve and change the disposable sleeve on your curing light? Do you sterilize the little light blocker? Digital scanners. We use disposable sleeves on the Prime Scan. Now, since the Prime Scan comes with an autoclavable sleeve, it's impractical to try to sterilize that and turn it around if you get back-to-back crowns. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but disposable makes a lot of sense for all scanners, iTero, Sirona, whatever. Computer keyboards. Do you have something covering your keyboard that you can sterilize? Do you have sterilizable keyboards like Clean Keys? The suction hoses, are they barriered? The storage drawer handles, soap containers. Do you have touchless soap? Do you have touchless ability to dry your hands in some fashion? Are your bonding agents, liners, cements, medications enclosed so that don't get cross-contaminated? The patient mirror, impressions, syringes. How about your loops? Your loops are on your face, and whether you have a face shield over them or whatever, they need to be disinfected as well after every patient. These are things that are easily missed, whether it's eyeglasses, safety glasses, sterile pens and pencils. Some patients even brought their own pens. We constantly were, sterilizing pens and having one per patient. We don't use a polishing lathe. We don't clean people's dentures or night guards anymore. We dump the ultrasonic every night. If you don't do that, we're very strict protocols around the ultrasonic. No more rag wheels, laboratory polishing. All of that is done where if it's not sterile, it doesn't go near the lab. How about the X-ray unit? Intraoral arms of the chair. As you can see, bathroom sinks, countertop. There's a lot of things to look at to make sure that you're on top of all of these different things that need a second look. So I hope that all of this is kind of giving you an idea of some things to look for, some preparedness. If there's anything that I said that you want more information about, again, you can go to gratefuldental.com. I think that there's a lot of new information out there. One of the ways that you can screen at home, there was a lot of talk about getting your staff tested. I think that I am very lucky to have a whole bunch of patients that work for Abbott Diagnostics, scientists that have been at the forefront of science advancements over the last 30 years, and keeping a close personal relationship with them. They told me about the ID Now test that came out in April 15th. I was very disappointed in the spring with the testing. I thought some of it was inaccurate. I thought that there was a lot of rhetoric and disinformation about which test was the best and methods and this type of thing. I think there was a learning curve about the people that were given the test, but I certainly think that by August 15th, testing is incredibly better. Now, Brett, testing is been helped by the financial necessity of all universities to protect their staff, teachers, and students on campus. I think that it was a student at a university that invented a swab that on moisture sticks out tentacles and gives a better sample. I think that the advancements in testing were furthered by massive amounts of money by the NCAA and the NBA, the NHL, and especially the NFL. It is incredibly interesting to see that large group amount of people being tested every single day. The results are never questioned. The players, without exception, have all recovered and are all continuing to play, bar injury. So no one has not been able to finish the season that I'm aware of in the NFL because of COVID. It's mind-boggling to me. The idea that 42% of all the positive tests that we received this year had no symptoms at any time. I think that that's why this virus is more serious and scary than any other. The ability to test your staff became just insurmountable. If your staff says, I was in the protest, whatever that protest was, I'm not going to get into that stuff, but I need to go get a test before I can come back to work. There was people around me, and I would have to wait 2 to 3 days to get a test result back in June. I think it's much easier to get a faster result now, but this is the new test that Abbott has just released, called the Binax Now. The Binax Now costs $25. It can be purchased through Abbott's website, and you can do a home test. You can get the results in 15 minutes. The ID Now was being hoarded by hospitals, whether they're corporate or whatever, and facilities that needed those immediate answers. The rapid testing has been utilized by anybody that had the money to get their hands on it. That doesn't mean that we can get rapid testing in our office. Matter of fact, I applied for a waiver of FDA certificate back in March, and then again in April through Abbott to try to do testing in my office. I got an email about a month ago saying, we didn't forget about you. You're still in line. But at this point, my staff was a little bit leery of bringing more people of potential risk into our, what we call the yellow submarine, or kind of our sealed safe area. And so whether or not you do testing in your office, whether or not you have it available, this is a perfect example of how you can cheaply do a test at home to safely get an accurate result.
And can anyone buy these now, Jeff?
What's that? Yeah, as far as I understand it, and again, I'll be posting more stuff on my website about it, but according to the people at Abbott, this is available for purchase. Now, whether you can get more than one, whether it's one per, I don't know how it works, but we'll find out. So, a lot of concern about whether people have antibodies to this. My biggest disappointment, Brett, I'll be right up front and candid. The advancements in antibody testing have been weak. I don't know if there's some correlation between big pharma and getting people to comply with the vaccine, to not leave anything to doubt, to achieve herd immunity, which I've always been told is 50% of the population vaccinated. Now they're saying on TV 75%. So I don't know when that changed all of a sudden, but I would check those numbers because I believe 75% is not necessary to achieve herd immunity. But if we have no way to really look at antibodies, we don't know who has the antibodies and who doesn't. We don't know who the actual people who need the vaccine, and we don't understand antibodies. So let's quickly talk about antibodies because that's the most complicated thing. Right now, you can get an antibody test that will tell you if you have one, maybe two immunoglobulins. Those are the ones used to identify who's contagious. There are 7 immunoglobulins that need to be tested to fully grasp whether the person has developed immunity. I'm not going to get too much into it. That's a complicated subject, but I would like to see better antibody testing. I would like to have accessibility and accuracy for all 7 immunoglobulins so that we can all determine who really needs it. So that brings us to the actual vaccines, which there's been a ton of just questions about. As a matter of fact, you and I, on a personal level, you said, hey, Jeff, you've been giving me the correct information since beginning of last year. You know, it's been almost 12 months. You're my go-to guy for info. So you told me, hey, I had an opportunity to get the Pfizer. Now I got an opportunity to get the Moderna. So people are asking me, my patients, my staff, are you going to get it? Are you going to get the vaccine? Absolutely, I'm going to get the vaccine. I don't think there's any reason to think that the vaccine is not safe unless there's something specific with your health. Meaning, if you have an allergy and you carry around an EpiPen, don't do it. If you are old and have immunocompromised situations or health issues, by all means, discuss it with your primary care physician, your team of healthcare providers. It's not something that you just decide because they said on TV to go line up, that you need to do. Each person has their own individual situation. I think that people who are young and healthy think that they've had it. Okay, that might be true, but until we get antibody testing, there's no way to tell if you have immunity. So let's talk about the different vaccines. So the Pfizer biotech vaccine is very similar to the Moderna. We're going to be talking about Armenia, and shout out to the creator and developer of the Moderna vaccine. He is Armenian. And so, you know, right away, I like that one because the guy was Armenian. But what does it really mean? What is the difference in these vaccines? What you see on your screen is a paramount shift in how vaccines are developed. Attenuated vaccines are definitely developed with a live vaccine. The Pfizer, biotech, and Moderna are similar in that they need to be administered within a certain amount of days from the time that they're made and shipped. They need to be kept at a certain temperature, which is an ultra cold freezer storage. They are technique sensitive as far as administration and storage and transport. Now, it's going to be very difficult to know if the transport, the storage, and the administration was done exactly right within those timeframes, within those temperatures. So bear that in mind. The other difference is that a spike protein of the coronavirus is inserted, and I moved this so that you can look at this slide from Bloomberg research, which was gained through different sources of development to try to explain the difference in these things. But I am noting the word harmless. Why would they put the word harmless before chimpanzee virus, which is genetically changed that it cannot grow in humans? it seems odd that a scientific resource would put the word harmless there, meaning that there may be people out there that don't understand science who may think I'm not putting a chimpanzee DNA particle into my body. Look, the chimpanzee viruses and other different DNA cells and mRNA spike chains have been used to attenuate viruses over the years, whether it's polio or what Dr. Fauci has been working on since the early 80s, his quest for an HIV vaccine, which hasn't been able to been achieved. And the amazing part is that they've developed these vaccines in such a short period of time. If you think about how long they've been working on the HIV vaccine, which is another type of coronavirus, and they were able to create these viruses into these cells to get it into a human cell so that your immune system can produce antibodies to fend off being contracted with this disease. This new one through AstraZeneca is the one that my colleagues and patients at Abbott have their eye on. Now, I started asking questions because I wanted to know why they favored that one so much. And this revolutionary new way of making vaccines takes an mRNA sequence of spike protein and sticks it in a lipid coating. Once in the cells, the mRNA sequence starts to reproduce. So we're using mRNA sequences in a lipid coating that gets into the immune cells and creates antibodies that way. I hope it wasn't too confusing, but me personally, I'm going to take the AstraZeneca when I can get it, as soon as I can get it. Now, does that mean I wouldn't take the other ones? You asked me, should I get the Moderna? You know, availability and timing is everything. And so as tier 2 healthcare providers, which, by the way, the CDC has deemed us essential healthcare workers. So anybody who thinks there's going to be another shutdown of dental offices is mistaken. We are not in the same category we were on March 16th of 2020. We will not be shut down. We will continue to care for people's health the way we always have. And that means you're better off getting the vaccine sooner than later. Although I have talked to people all over the country, and some have experienced chills, fever. They were mostly 2 days after, some general lethargic tiredness, all of which from every person who complained about any kind of side effects was gone in a couple days. So I don't think it's anything worse than catching the flu for the 24-hour flu bug. Their arm was sore. And for people like us that give injections as a living, when you take something ultra super cold and inject it into body temperature musculature, you're going to get an immediate evacuation of vasculature blood supply. And that is what is going to create some pain. So that's normal to have a sore arm. Mm-hmm. Now, will the AstraZeneca one hurt as much? We'll have to wait and find out. I don't know if that has any relevance. I know there's still a lot of questions about vaccines. All of this is relatively new. I hope that all of the things that I have discussed will help us all mitigate our risks. This year was one of the worst in American history. They're now quoting 340,000 people that have lost their lives with some kind of connection to COVID. And I say that because I've been one of those people who has been scrutinizing the numbers. I think the numbers coming out of UIC did not have any basis for opinion. They were just data. And if you go through that data, what you'll find is half of the fatalities were over the mortality rate with some kind of significant health problem. They noted that an A1C for diabetics of 8.5 or higher had a significant higher death rate. People with pulmonary lung function problems, pulmonary disease, immunosuppression, for any reason, we're all at a higher risk, as well as anybody over the mortality rate. And since the baby boomers are at the mortality rate or higher, we did see a lot of people, unfortunately, 42% were in long care facilities or in hospice care. So a lot of the people that did unfortunately succumb to this virus did not have the defenses to fight against it. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't people, and we're still studying why some people have had a much more severe reaction than others, and this is going to be ongoing. But I personally lost some very dear people to me. One of my long-term mentors in my life was Dr. Harold Arai, one of the best orthodontists, if not the best I ever met. He was my life coach, my financial dental person to kind of keep me in the right direction. And some of his wisdom I shared with you guys, and some of it we won't be able to get from him. But you know, rest in peace, Harold. We all miss you. You never got a proper send-off. You never got a wake. You never got a memorial, or people didn't get to gather. One of our close friends, Russell Spinazzi, lost his son, and we weren't able to gather and help him grieve. It was horrible. One of my closest friends, and you and I are both past presidents of Chicago Dental Society branch, and the former director, Dr. Chuck DeFranco, one of our dear friends. And we really need to give a shout out to everyone in organized dentistry this year. You and I know how much work that was when we did it. I cannot even imagine what it was like this year, trying to disseminate information to member constituents. If any of you that I've talked to who did not renew your membership or do not contribute to Dental Pack, Governor's Club, I know it's a big expense. I know a lot of you had a rough financial year. This is more than ever a need to be a member of organized dentistry. We need your support as we lobby for all of these things I talked about at the beginning. Congress has to be on our side, and we need to persuade them like all other special interest lobby groups. Otherwise, we will continue to suffer at the hands of insurance companies. And I really believe every dentist should be a member of organized dentistry. But a shout out to all the people of the ADA, the CDS, the ISDS, who did a tremendous job trying to mitigate all these crazy changes, get people PPE and testing, and keep us apprised of all these situations with legislature. Kudos to those people that put in so much time, day and night, on Zoom calls all the time. I don't think that there's any reason that any of these people shouldn't get their due. So nice job. I think that, you know, CE and education is your way for all of those people that are out of school less than 10 years, as Howard calls them, the dental kindergartners. I hope all this was helpful. Any of you can reach out to me, gratefuldental.com. I think that we want to give you the most up-to-date information and try to help you. I've been a mentor at Spear Education, and previous to that, Scottsdale Center for Dentistry. CDOCS is down there. Whether it's Dr. Christensen or the Pankey Institute, continue to do your CE. The most important thing that we learned is if you cannot do a root canal on a tooth, if you cannot get someone out of pain, if you don't know how to remove a tooth, bone graft a socket, put an implant in, you are doing your patients a disservice, and you're doing yourself a financial disservice. Your specialists will help you. They'll get plenty of cases that you deem out of your realm, but doing simple socket grafting and simple extractions and simple endo and simple implant placement is an absolute must if you're going to be profitable this year. Brett, I think we should take a moment of silence for all of our colleagues, family, friends, researchers, and everybody that's been involved in what we just went through. May they rest in peace, and may nothing that anyone suffered through this year not go without our learning what we learned last year and taking it into this year. 2021 is upon us. Let's use what we learned to be better. Amen.
Amen to that, man. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to our next segment.
Absolutely. So we just appreciate everyone. We're going to come back with part 2. We're going to discuss service in dentistry and specifically Dr. Wittmus's connection to Armenia, where he's been serving for the last 20 years, and just learning about, what the area means to him, why service is so important, how you can get involved. And what I think you're going to see is in essence, a case study on your dental service becoming part of your personal life. And so to witness what's happening in Armenia, which Dr. Wittmus is going to break down for us, and being able to understand, the tragedy and the lack of news coverage, and the fact that he knows these areas intimately, as he's been treating patients in this area for 20 years. They have a mobile clinic on a bus, so they're able to move around and have really gotten to know generations of these families that are being, in essence, it's a genocide. So we'll be anxious to hear that. So thank everyone for joining us for part one. We're going to come back with part two here just in a moment, and super grateful for your attention. Wishing everyone a happy new year. Thank you to Dr. Wittmus for all of his information. As you can see, for me personally, what a trusted resource he's been for me. And I'm so grateful for that. So we will be back in just a moment to start part two. Okay, welcome. I am Dr. Brett Gilbert. I'm here with a colleague, friend, just a trusted resource of information, Dr. Jeff Wittmus. He's a dentist that practices here in Chicago, very gifted dentist, very well-rounded practice. He can do it all, and he's become a true leader in this dental community within the country and globally too. I would say that he would stand amongst those dentists that really have a true holistic approach and really can do it all. So what we're here for today is a part two segment, and we're going to be discussing dental service, something that's very near and dear to both Jeff and I. Myself, I've been on dental missions to Jamaica. I also take a lot of effort and time to contribute endodontic specialty care to the Chicago Dental Society Foundation Clinic here in Chicago. Dental service, once you dip your toe into it, becomes part of your life. And the reason that Dr. Wittmus is here is because dental service is a huge part of his life. And as it turns out, it's never been as important to discuss right now because his service is in Armenia, where he's been serving for 20 plus years. And he knows this region. He knows the people. He served them. He knows generations of their families. And right now there's an absolute humanitarian crisis that's going on there. So Jeff's going to break that down for us and just give us a sense of what's happening, what it all means to him. And ultimately, Jeff, I'd love for there to be some action step of what any viewers could be able to do to contribute their own help to this situation. So again, Dr. Jeff Wittmus, really excited to have you here, and let us know what's going on with dental service, and especially in Armenia.
Well, thanks for doing this, Brett. And I want to welcome anybody who caught part one of our podcast earlier. Please stay with us. I think that whether you know where Armenia is or what's going on over there, I think that you can certainly learn about how to create a service mission. And I want to start by saying that while the JADA of November proved with data that dental providers are not at risk as much as we thought in the spring, and our universal precautions and PPE and all that stuff really works. We've been great at mitigating transmission and being able to provide care safely. Ironically, December's issue of the JADA had an article about recruitment considerations for dental short-term missions relating to holistic development of dentists. So if you haven't opened your JADA, I thought it's pretty interesting how they try to quantify the reward. You asked me a simple question: what does service mean to me? That's a tough question. So I'll answer your question in a minute. What the JADA was able to determine is that the spiritual nature or holistic nature of caring and healing other people is very powerful. It's not just giving, you're actually using your hands to heal somebody. They talk about the emotional, intellectual, physical, moral, and social disciplines, and also the spiritual. So what does it mean to me? Well, I guess I got to go back to the beginning. I got involved in Armenia because of one reason, and that was my closest to my grandmother. My grandmother at the age of 13 and my great aunt at the age of 11 and a few other relatives actually survived the genocide in Turkey where they lived. Now, the genocide in Turkey is something that is well documented. There's plenty of information out there about the Armenian genocide of 1915. For those of you who don't know, 1.2 million women and children were marched into the desert. They were told by government officials that the men who had been taken previous to that on the pretense of going into war on the behalf of Turkey during World War I and were executed. They came back for the women and children and they marched them into the desert with no food or water. And my grandmother survived that. And so, to say that she was a unique person with unique life is an understatement. She left in 1915 and made her way through the desert, surviving somehow, which I won't get into. She made it to Lebanon, Syria, and then Lebanon, and then eventually France, and 4 years later was in the United States. That was just in time for the Depression and World War II. And then a lot of things that we've lived through kind of pale in comparison to those times. If you really think about what they've been through, I think this pandemic is not as severe if you think about things in totality. The priest at my church at the time was Haiserp Aron Jebedjian, who had very close ties to people in Yerevan and had told me that, hey, there's this dental clinic in this orphan camp that we go to for a week to take these college kids to give service back to help their home country. So it's ACYOA, which is a church group from Armenian diocese in America. And he's taken a group of college students over there and said, hey, why don't you go with us? And then, you can fix the orphans' teeth that were created from the war with Azerbaijan in the 90s. So after the Armenians left the Soviet Union and precipitated the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1990, they suffered one of the worst earthquakes with humanitarian devastation ever recorded in modern history. And I'll show you a little bit about where that happened on the map. After Armenia was trying to recover without much help, if any, from outside of the country because they had left Russia and Russia wasn't helping them and the US wasn't helping them. Basically was Armenians like myself from America who donated money and their time to try to help this country pick up the pieces. That was a 7-year war. So, we helped them recover by providing free dental services. And we started out with flashlights and lawn chairs and numbing people up and taking teeth out. And, we realized that we couldn't provide the level of care that we wanted to without a dental clinic. And so we immediately started to build a dental clinic. The Jambar, as I call it, it just means camp in Armenian. We were able to finance every summer a summer camp for kids who came from Artsakh and other poor areas of the mountainous region and gave them free dental care. So I show up at this dental clinic and the dental clinic is locked. And I said, in Armenian, where are the keys? and they say, Chiga, meaning there is no keys. That's what that means. There's no keys. So I think I was kind of devastated that I had been traveling halfway around the world and I couldn't get into the dental clinic. I was ready to go. I was going to fix every kid myself and, let's have at it. There's nothing we can't do, right? Well, it turns out that whether you want to call it coincidence or whatever, the person who is running that clinic and who had started it and founded it is Dr. Viken Garabedian out in Laguna Niguel, California. And when we met, it was fate because we became very close friends and have had a partnership with this project since 2001. And he had started it in the late 90s. And we've taken it to new heights over the last 20 years as we help this region recover, as we helped give an incentive to all the teachers. We not only treated all the children 18 and under, but all the teachers at the universities and schools, and of course, all the military personnel. So on your screen, you see Mount Ararat in the background. And this is if you've never been to Armenia, and welcome for all the non-dentist Armenians who want to watch this presentation. I think that the first thing that I saw was Mount Ararat, and this picture doesn't do it justice because it is a sight to behold. It is where the Armenians have lived under the shadow of Mount Ararat since Babylonian times, thousands of years before the birth of Christ. And this is where Noah's Ark resides. Now, on that mountain in the background during the summer, you can get some satellite photos of what looks like a wooden ship wreckage. Turkish government won't let anybody go up and excavate it. Not sure why, but something tells me they don't want any Bible stories to come true. Maybe that has something to do with them being a different religion. I don't know. But there's people that want to go up there and take a look, and they won't let them because Turkey is on the opposite side of that hill. I think that the city of Yerevan is a large metropolis. It is a wonderful place with well over 1 million people. And one of the things that you'll notice about Armenia when you get there is almost 100% of everybody that lives in that country is Armenian. They don't have any diversity whatsoever. They do have visitors from other places, but basically the residents of Armenia, which is about the size of Maryland, which is where you're from, I believe, Brett. That's about the size of Armenia, and it is almost entirely, without exception, Armenians. Armenians are all Christians. In 301 AD, they were the first Christian nation to declare themselves all Christian. They had previously been a pagan or idol fire worshiping religion. And when St. Gregory came to Armenia, he was imprisoned in Corviop in a pit for many years. This is not Corviop, but if you look at the map, we can kind of guide you around. Sorry. So let's get some geography out of the way, huh? Armenia is located in the Near East. That is between Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Now, with the center of the map being the most recognizable map feature is Lake Sevan. Lake Sevan is contained within Armenia, and it is in the center of your map. Yerevan is just to the left, and it is a major city. Just straight south of Yerevan is a place called Ararat. And if you look under the A of Ararat region, you'll see Corviop. Corviop is a church where St. Gregory had been imprisoned for years in this pit. And that was because he was trying to spread the word of Christianity. Unbeknownst to the king who put him in there, there was some nuns who were throwing him bread and scraps down into the pit. So after years of him surviving down there, the king, Dirtat, was starting to go insane. And his love for, ironically, one of the nuns, Ripsime, was making him crazy. And she told him the only cure would be to let St. Gregory out of the pit. And they eventually did. And he was able in 301 AD to convert Armenia to entirely Christianity. Since then, everybody around them has been trying to get rid of them, to be candid. I think that they have fought many wars over the years, whether it was Genghis Khan and his massive army that finally met its demise in a place called Amberd. And if you look in Aragatsun, right under the O of Aragatsun is a place called Amberd. It's a fortress which at the time in 2001, the walls were still standing. It's also right near a place where my wife and I got married. And that place is called Derer. Derer means the place. This is Derer, where my wife Laura and I were married. My God, it's 2009. So in the background, you can see Mount Ararat. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a little outhouse. Now you can't really see it. So they don't have indoor plumbing there. So down in the bottom left-hand corner is an outhouse facing Mount Ararat. Now, whether that is a little cold on the bottom in the winter, but what a view. Well, what a view to do your business. So this is also a 600-year-old church. And it's in the most amazing place I've ever been. When I first went there in 2001, again, it might have been coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, but we got lost on our way to Amberd, and somehow we wound up here. And we met the curator of the church. And at the time, you know, this is just another church. In Armenia, there's hundreds of churches. They're thousands of years old, and they all have an interesting story and history. And they carry a presence of God more so than I think churches that are newer here. Let's just put it that way. Now, I was sad to find out after going through the tour and really becoming close friends with this curator who had to convince us to let him give us the tour in the first place. But this building is intact. All the earthquakes, the wars, the things that have happened in this region, and it looks like the day it was built. And every summer, these German archaeology or architectural students would come and study it. How did they build this that it stood the test of time? And so they would go through all their mathematical formulas and survey and measure and this and that, and they were never able to come up with an answer. And so on the way out, the curator would always ask him, and his name is Gurkin. And he would always ask them, did you come up with your answer? And they said, no, not anything definitive. And he said to them very plainly, could it just be because God protects this church? And they had to go home to Germany and ponder that for a little bit. So this place was not having service. When Armenia left the Soviet Union in 1990, had the earthquake and then the war. The Soviets had cleaned out all the altars and taken all the gold and stuff off the altars. And basically it was not suitable in the church's eyes to have service. Kind of a bummer. And so every summer I would pay visit to my friend Gurken, and we would sit in his little shack that you can see that's right next to the church, directly mid bottom. And that's where he lives. And I was a guest in his home many times, and he would never take money from me. He was such a proud person that he didn't want charity. He wanted to work hard to try to survive and take what God gave him. And that was to protect this church and to live here and be its curator, self-appointed. Well, I got frustrated, especially after a few vodka shots, what they call tout, ori. And so I started shoving $100 bills under his seat cushion in his kitchen. And this went on for years until they lifted up the cushion one day and they had more money than they knew what to do with, since at the time, US money was pretty well valued over there. Well, I was assuming he would take that money to help him live a better life. But what he did was he took all the money and he invested it in the church, and he got the altar up and running. And so in 2008, when I went to do my mission, this church was now having its first baptism. And I was so excited that the church was now a real church again. And he said to me in Armenian, he said, Jeff John, this is your church. Nothing is possible without you. And so I told Laura when I came back, not only did I want to marry her, but I wanted to get married in this church. And now you know Laura pretty well. Yeah. So not too many American daughters of the American Revolution that live in the United States would go sight unseen to a foreign country she'd never been, to a church she's never set foot in, and have a real wedding ceremony. And it was a pretty special time for us. We did go on a honeymoon to a place called Jermuk. And Jermuk is here as you look, Vayat Zor, which is where our clinic is. And so we drove from Yerevan to Yeregnadzor, which is in the Vayat Zor region. And that's where we've done all of our mission work. So, you know, I knew the region pretty well because I spent most of my time there doing dentistry. And right where the S in Vayat Zor is, there's a river above that S. And along that river is where our camp is, that we have a 3-chair dental clinic with pretty much everything that you could ever want, including a lot of high-end endo stuff. No microscope, but we had a lot donated from our endodontists like Charlie Tatuzian, who lectured for Tulsa, and we have everything that we need there. And I like to call this area, you know, the Sunnik region, which is in the bottom right, as kind of the mountainous region where a lot of the money did not flow out of Yerevan, and it's still very, very poor. And so setting up in this region has given us an infinite amount of people to serve. And as we went to our honeymoon in Jermuk, Jermuk is a place where the water comes straight from the mountain, and it is the purest, most minerally enriched water in the world. So much so that they call this water medicinal water. And they can legally put that on the label because of the amount of minerals that are in that water. People come from all over the world. They call it a fountain of youth. And we have drank from that fountain of youth straight from the mountain. The problem is it started to turn into a tourist area by the time we got there for our honeymoon. And we lasted about one night with the construction and the stuff that was going on to try to entice people to come from different parts of the world and see this incredible treasure that Armenia has. And so honestly, Brett, Laura and I spent our honeymoon in an orphan camp, and I did dentistry when I was supposed to be relaxing.
Yeah, but that made it even more meaningful.
It makes me happy to do it. And I felt like sitting around in that place wasn't for us. And so we left. And, you know, we've been able to treat hundreds of people each summer and provide them a place to stay as a summer camp for the kids. And if you look over to the right, the hashed area is surrounding some colored areas. That entire region is what I call Artsakh. It is the mountainous Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh. And that area is what has recently been changed. So let's get our bearings here. To the left is the direction of west is Turkey. Turkey is on the other side of Mount Ararat, which we just pointed to on the map. North is the country of Georgia. On the east side of Armenia is Azerbaijan. Now, these states, not Turkey, but the other two states, were created by the Soviet Union during the breakup of the Soviet Union. And for those of you who don't know the history back then, the Soviet Union initially put the KGB head in as a dictator in Azerbaijan. It was an area that was hospitable to Muslims of all different beliefs. And Georgia was more the democratic state, holding elections and kind of a go-between Turkey and Azerbaijan, with Chechnya and Russia being to the north between the Caspian and Black Sea. The Caspian and Black Sea are of importance because this is where the oil pipelines for crude oil, natural gas, and other types of reservoirs and production of natural resources for the world. And so I think that Armenia was relegated to the area which really doesn't have access to any of that. On top of that, Azerbaijan around the south and east of those regions, as well as Turkey, has been a demilitarized zone since Armenia left Russia and subsequently had the war with Azerbaijan and reset up new borders, which again are the hashed areas. I've had the luxury of traveling all over Armenia, and whether you're in Lori to the north and you visit a castle that was used on the Silk Road during what we would call the barbarian times, where trade between Asia and Europe went through the Silk Road. This area has always attracted aggressors, whether it was Genghis Khan, who surrounded Amberd and put them under a decades-long siege, which the Armenians survived and ultimately are credited with breaking Genghis Khan's army. Whether it was the Persians who came out of the east to indoctrinate everyone under the rule of Persia. Armenia at one time spread between the Mediterranean, Caspian, Black Sea, and included Syria, Iraq, parts of Iran, and basically most of the Middle East. Those were quite a while ago, and throughout the wars, Armenia continued to get smaller and smaller. And in 301 AD, it is the largest concentration of Christians in this area. I think that traveling in Sunik and going across the border into Artsakh, which is connected by the Latchim corridor, which is between the city of Goris, which is in Sunik at the bottom of the page, and Sushi, which is the capital of Artsakh. We were, during the last 20 years, redeveloping those roads, rebuilding those cities, giving free dental care and healthcare provided to the people in Artsakh who had been not recognized by international community as a independent nation and not absorbed into Armenia. And so this disputed territory has been settled recently with horrible humanitarian casualties. And I'll get into that in a little bit. The roads that connected Armenia to that area of the world basically were the only lifelines in and out of that area. The entire surrounding area was demilitarized zones. So to give you an idea, I did travel up to Gyumri, which is in the upper left. It's in Shirak. And Gyumri was the site of the most devastated area of the earthquake in 1990. And so we kind of toured where they were at in their recovery. And, you know, back in 2005, 2006, they were still struggling to recover. Most of the relief efforts were focused in that area until the war broke out. And so things got kind of left unfinished. But I did have the opportunity to travel to a part of Gyumri, which is across the river from Ani. And Ani is a city in Turkey that was known as the city of churches. And I am truly one of the few Armenians who's been able to view Ani from the Armenian side. Now, that is something that was done with a military escort and with people with the proper channels to get the proper documents to get over there. But it was very interesting to see Armenians making a pilgrimage to Ani from the Turkish side and having to go through the entire country to get there and then back. And so, you know, there are hidden gems in Armenia to see. And certainly if there's Armenians that want to reach out to me who want to travel there or support the economy or our projects, I think that there's much to see. Although this year has changed things quite a bit, you know, I'll go into some of the changes that happened recently, but let's get back to the what we do over there. So this is Artsakh. This is a picture of the region that was devastated. This is their iconic symbol. It is a giant statue of Mamik and Babik, which is mother and father. And it's a symbol that no matter who has tried to displace Armenians, the core thing that keeps them going is family. And I think we've all learned that this year, that family is really what drives not only a nation, but a culture, an ethnic background, race. I mean, what makes us all unique is our family. And so this is symbolic. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's still standing. Having done so much work with the military personnel that have defended that region, I actually was awarded something I probably don't deserve, which is a Medal of Honor in the Artsakh Army. I don't believe that anyone who has not been in the line of fire, maybe I'm wrong, has been awarded this medal. So you can see the direct relationship that we have with the military. The military is the people that we depend on to keep the area safe. They're on 24-hour watch for the last 20 years. And I didn't understand why until a few months ago. So this is us, obviously pre-pandemic. I wouldn't call me out for any PPP violations. There's no OSHA over there. We were unable to secure an autoclave, and we've used cold sterile and heat sterilization for everything, along with disposable things that we donate. I do have my mask off, but that was for the picture. So don't get the impression that we are working without proper PPE. We've had multiple doctors, including Garo Nazarian from Manhattan and Charlie and Vikon from California that I've mentioned already, and Robert Garabedian and others who have come and helped us. And what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to take dental students to get them some on-site legal dental training. We've also taken the liberty to train dentists from Armenia.
So when I go over there and I'm working on these patients, they speak a dialect of Armenian, which is Eastern dialect. After the genocide in 1915, the diaspora, or the people from Armenia or Armenian roots who do not live in Armenia, we call them the diaspora, they speak Western Armenian. So when I brought these Armenian speaking dentists from America, they were having trouble communicating with the kids. Now, my Armenian isn't great, but I do speak pretty good dental Armenian, and I do know how to communicate with things like open wider, open big, where does it hurt? Are you numb yet? Where's the pain? You know, these type of things were pretty easy, but translating, we felt that training Armenian dentists and making sure communication lines were good was so important. But what we didn't realize is we took a lot of dentally trained Armenian dentists who, by the way, are very good, like all Russian dentists, at surgery. You know, the blood and guts of what I call military dentistry is very simple. It's something that we all went through in the spring. If you don't know how to do a surgical extraction or a molar root canal, you're really not going to be of a whole lot of help. Now, we don't do a lot of crowns, but to preserve tooth structure and bone jaw support, what we would do is in a 14-year-old kid who has bombed out molars, we would do the endo and do some kind of buildup and amalgam or use remaining tooth structure to try to save the tooth. Military dentistry is pretty simple. It means that you may not be able to do a follow-up visit for the patient, which means we did use amalgam because I think its survival rate without any preventative care is a little bit better than composite, especially for large restorations. We did a lot of extractions to get people out of pain, to get rid of compromised, fractured, or beyond restorability teeth. Being able to do surgery and root canals is so important when you're doing this, and I still think it's so important to dentistry to be able to serve your patients. I think doing military dentistry, as you can see, it requires people to work on patients and try to complete as many treatment plans as possible. We work 16 hours a day in the dental clinics, and we provide as much care as possible. This is Kevin Bargamian from Chicago, and this is Vikan Garabedian with me. A patient here is a high sorp or a bishop from Georgia for Armenians, and when he heard that we were in town, he drove all the way down to Sunik to see us because he had a dental problem. So when word gets out that we're in the country, people do know us. This is one of my original crews. I'm so proud of them. They were assistants, and they helped us back in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, and they're all successful dentists in their own right. Mahir is an amazing dentist in Spain, doing a lot of bone grafting and implants now and sinus lifts. And he teaches at the university, and seeing where he started and where he's at now is so proud of how he's been able to make the most of his career. Arman is with the black hat in the background, is now practicing in Southern California because he won the lottery to get a visa, which isn't easy. Things have been tough for them in Armenia. There are people that help us. The gentleman all the way to my left at the end is Hovig. Hovig is a physician radiologist in Yerevan and has dedicated his life to helping us. He's been my personal driver and protector. And, you know, driving through some of these roads, his car is considered an ambulance. So we don't get stopped by the normal military personnel and other types of things. And there is a bishop in Sunik. His name is Ibrahim. Ibrahim has helped us make these projects come true. In the background is sunset at Noravank. And Noravank is certainly an interesting area. I'm going to go back to the map for a minute. Noravank is near the bottom of the purple region here, just below Yerignatsor. Noravank is a unique place where a several $1 million project was done over the last 10 years to renovate that 11th century church. And a lot of the renovations of these churches have been done over the years because of their historical significance. And unfortunately, over the last 90 days, things took a turn for the worse. The area in the shaded, surrounded by the shaded region, was lost in a short war with Azerbaijan. This territory had been disputed, and without being able to come to a reasonable resolution for both sides, Azerbaijan enlisted the help of Turkey, and Turkey utilized weapons through NATO that were developed by Israeli and US weapons scientists. And to be honest, what they created was pretty amazing. They created it to try to find and root out Osama bin Laden in the mountains of Afghanistan. The mountainous region in that area is similar terrain. They approached an enemy in the Armenians who had been rooted and settled and defending those mountains for centuries. They maintained the high ground, and unfortunately for everyone, they basically took a lot of the ethnic minority in Azerbaijan. They coerced, forced, blackmailed, whatever you want to say, to try to be the first wave over the mountain to retake what they said is their land. Now, in retrospect, Azerbaijan was created in the late 80s in preparation for the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And so I think that the Armenians, having lived in this region for centuries, and when I show you these churches that are centuries old, and you have generation upon generation of people that have lived in that area, it's not so easy to just tell people to go move somewhere else or go back to a different region. These are the same people that have made the trek up the mountain every day to go to service. I think that these churches have stood the test of time because they're fortresses. There's an area in Artsakh called Ganzazar, which is kind of like the movies Lord of the Rings. I mean, you know, it looks completely surreal, and pictures don't do it justice. There was a priest who decided that he was not going to leave that church during the first war. And they had about 300 to 500 Azeri soldiers try to secure the region and the church. Der Hovannes is his name. I've met him many times. Der Hovannes in English is Father John. And our nickname for him is Rambo. He kind of looks like John Wayne, about 6'5", 230, 225, big dude. He defended that church by himself. He would climb at night into the mountains and fire at the Azerbaijan troops, and then hike around to the other side and fire from the other side. And eventually they left because they thought that they were surrounded by an invisible Armenian army, which turned out to be one guy. After this recent turmoil, 2018, I had run into him in Dadivank. Dadivank is a very old church where different frescoes from pre-BC were discovered, and architectural archaeologists from Europe, Italy, all over the world came, and they were studying that church, and I happened to run into him there. And he was on to the next challenge of trying to preserve these incredible treasures of history. And sure enough, when this turmoil broke out in September, he refused to leave, and some of our soldiers remained behind in disregard for the treaty, and eventually the Russian troops have helped protect that area. But this is what we're talking about as far as once the initial wave was met, and a lot of the initial citizens, I want to call them, because I don't believe that they were soldiers, met an untimely demise at the hands of the Armenian military. They then broke out the Turkish military support, and the Azerbaijans rolled out these new drones, and basically they were able to root out most of the area with relentless bombing of ballistic missiles of the newest technology, and also using drones to reclaim the highland. They put them in a very bad position, and then they signed a treaty which gave this land back to Azerbaijan. Now you'll notice there's an area right in front of Bedzor, or Lachim corridor, as we call it, the one connecting place, and that's Sushi. Well, part of the treaty calls for the Azerbaijan military to park in Sushi right in front of our front door there. And then they've cut off the rest of Artsakh. And so I am very fearful that going forward, that we're not only going to lose an iconic bell tower church that had been renovated 150 years ago, which they blew up on the first day. They're also blowing up Armenian cemeteries, and they're trying to erase any record of Armenian culture in what they are now claiming as their own region. It's very sad, and I didn't want to get into the political stuff. This is where it gets kind of soul crushing for me after spending so much of my time, money, and effort to try to build up and resurrect this incredibly history-rich area of the world, only to watch it be destroyed in a month or two. So since then, we have taken refugees, mostly women and children, who fled the fighting and who had their homes destroyed by ballistic missiles, which, by the way, didn't miss anything with our technology. They pretty much hit every structure they aimed at. And so if there was anything left behind, I'm pretty sure they kind of set it afire and left. Most of the structures are cement, and so they didn't leave any personal belongings behind. And so we thought temporarily, until there's a treaty or a truce, that we could house these people in our clinic. And there is a resort that we were able to build called Lucy Tour. And Lucy Tour is located in Viat Zor, and Viat Zor just near our camp and dental clinics. We built this for two reasons, spending all this time, a couple weeks a summer with orphan kids. And when I say orphan kids, I really mean children who may have a mother or grandmother or both, but don't have older brothers or fathers or grandfathers because of the fighting. And I think that those kids are always given an opportunity to get the free dental care. And then we also wanted a place where people could come and visit the area in comfort, a little bit closer to a resort like you would find in Yerevan. And this is really the only facility outside of Yerevan that kind of is really cool to stay at. And there's horseback riding, and there's all kinds of things that you can do there with a pool and a little bit better accommodations than the camp. And so we did install a dental clinic at the resort, and we did continue to finance our dental clinics with the 3 chairs in Yeragis, which is what I call Jambar, where we started and where we continue to see patients every summer. But we also got 2 mobile clinics, which I'll get into in a minute. During all of the fighting, we took in about 300 refugees, and other places across Armenia took in refugees. We're still housing those 300 refugees, and there's other places that are doing the same. We are financing the clothing, heating, the feeding, housing of these people. We've raised enough money to build a school. And so, you know, these things are things that we've been able to do during a horrible crisis. So it's not just about providing dentistry, and it's not just about providing dentistry for the military, which was always one of our focuses, but this is a bus that we created. So we started out with 1 bus, and the bus would go down to the poorest regions of the mountain area, and we would service the people in that village until we got everybody taken care of. The assistants that we used during our 2 weeks there that we trained were some of the dentists that would man these mobile clinics. And the mobile clinics ran all year round with our funding. The mobile clinics serviced most of Sunik and Vayadzor area. Each of the dentists were paid by us to give free services. We supplied all the dental supplies, and there's a lot of logistics about getting supplies and dental needed materials into and equipment into the country that you want to do work in. The mobile clinics are nothing more than buses that we've retrofitted with 2 dental chairs, units with everything that you would need, and an x-ray unit. Patient comes into the bus and they get treatment. This is our newest bus, which we had retrofitted in 17, and we were going to get up and running after the summer of 18. They had a particularly cold winter, and we parked the bus at the military base that is in that region, and they watch over it for us while we continue to do dentistry during the winter months on the military personnel. That military personnel was charged with maintaining the bus. Unfortunately, we had a little mishap with the engine. They drained the water out of the engine, forgot to refill the water when they started it up in the spring. And so that bus went KO'd, and somebody felt so bad for us. We had a benefactor donate us enough money to get another bus up. Now we've repaired the other bus. So we have 2 large buses and a small bus that we've relocated to Yerignatsor, since that's one of the largest regions in the area. And that region is now currently been doing mobile dental services pro bono since October, end of October, beginning of November, and we'll continue to do so as long as we have funding. We continue to see refugees and take care of them in our 2 clinics, both in Jambar and in Lucitur. An ironic thing about the naming of Lucitur, which I didn't have anything to do with, but my grandmother, who survived the genocide in 1915, well, her name was Lucina, and we called her Grandma Lucy. So this place certainly seems like a second home to me, and we have done a lot for the different people. In the center here is Abraham Serpaizan, and this was a rare occasion where we were celebrating a wedding, and got to do so together. And it was one of his visits to the US, which is rare. The other thing that we did is, you are looking at a new clinic. This was where we housed the counselors for Jambar. When we would bring the orphan kids to the camp, we would put them up at camp, kind of like sending your kid to summer camp. We had counselors which we housed in these shacks, or kind of minimal insulated buildings across from where the kids stayed, and right on the river. The counselors donated their time to do all kinds of things with the students while they were waiting to get their dentistry done. So the first day you would come in, you would get an assessment. We went through every single kid, did a treatment plan, prophy, fluoride. We chose not to do sealants because under these conditions, an improperly done sealant, according to Dr. Gordon Christensen, can be more detrimental to a tooth than not putting a sealant. And so we don't want to trap any bacteria, create an endo situation and not be able to do a follow-up. Again, we're doing military dentistry. So we identified every cavity that we could fill. We did those. We took care of any teeth that needed to be extracted, including baby teeth to facilitate occlusion, non-restorable first and second molars. We always have an endodontist going at all times, 12 to 16 hours a day. And we also have an oral surgeon, which just happened to be me most of the time. Unfortunately, we could really use an oral surgeon over there, but I've been able to hold my own, and I've been able to get some surgically done extractions without having a striker or any fancy equipment, without really having much of my own as far as my array of elevators and forceps. And so, you know, you get a 150 or a 151, and you'd be lucky if you get a 77R, if you're lucky if it's sterilized. But, you know, you got basic tools. We joke around, you know, give me a pliers and a screwdriver and I can do it. But that's not quite the truth. We do have a lot of equipment and instruments over there that you need, but certainly this is not 100% everything you need in your office. I think the endo is the most sophisticated because obviously you have to use a rubber dam. Rotary instruments make it so incredibly faster to complete treatment. We don't have the luxury of getting the patient back for a second visit. But over the last month, we have incredibly been able to raise enough money and get enough manpower on the ground to change this into this. These buildings are now housing the new K-8 elementary school. This is the inside. This is all done in the last 2 months. It was directly our money that was funded with the help of Vikan Garabedian and all his generous friends and donors and dentists and Garo Nazarian and Manhattan. But I want to give a shout out to St. Gregory, the Illuminator Armenian Church in Chicago, who also donated money, which I matched. And they wanted to specifically use it for education. And this is specifically for education. You know, anybody who wants to go to Armenia and treat patients can get in touch with me. GratefulDental.com. Anybody who wants to make a donation to try to help this incredibly horrible humanitarian crisis. There's a lot of different things out there, from AGBU Humanitarian Relief Fund to ANCA, ANCA.org, which handles a lot of the political protests and whether or not what Azerbaijan and Turkey did to civilians with internationally banned weapons that were not supposed to be used in that manner for ethnic cleansing. You know, all of that is in international court. A lot of petitions and things need to be signed. Your Congress people need to know that you care. There's also a major push in Armenia to bring education to that region. Bishop Ibrahim has mentioned to me that he's going to really refocus the university down there to heavy mathematics with a gifted program and really try to focus on the development of modern technology drones. We can see that a future of our survival may rely in drones and not being able to outsmart your opponent in trying to remove from an area. But more importantly, if you want to help our cause and these refugees that we're caring for, we thought was temporary, but looks indefinite at this point. The Meri border of Armenia, which I'll go back to just briefly, is on the southern border where Iran is. And Iran is the only open border down here. Now, originally I had mentioned to Brett that this Meri corridor was going to be turned over to the Azerbaijanis, but the Azerbaijanis tried that, the Russians tried it in the tree, but ultimately Iran said, no way. We are going to control that border. And so that's something that I mentioned to you that I was incorrect about. This border continues to be controlled by Iran, and Iran is trying to help with this unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Russia is now stationed troops around the Lachim corridor. They will stay to up to 5 years to keep the peace, unless one of the sides decides they don't want them anymore, which makes me concerned that the Azerbaijani military, which just moved into Sushi, right in the front of the only way in and out of Artsakh, may ask them to leave. So, this may get worse, it may not. We're hoping for a peaceful resolution, but as of right now, that border remains the only open border. We'll continue to do our thing over there. We'll continue to train Armenians. We'll continue to employ those people to take care of the need of access to care in this region while we're not there. We'll continue to try to focus on education and healthcare. The parosfoundation.org, anybody can make a donation through that website. I want to make it quite clear that Paros Foundation is different than the Red Cross or Armenia Fund, which got a lot of attention because the Kardashians have given millions. Fund for Armenian Relief is another very popular one. There is a lot of entities out there that are doing wonderful work in Armenia. The thing that makes Paros Foundation different, the reason that we took up a partnership with them over the last 10 years is because they have given an administrative pledge that 100% of all the money that you donate with a check or a click to the Paros Foundation, in the memo of the check, Vyazor Mobile Dental Clinic. Up until recently, it was for the Vyazor refugees. We are now using the refugee fund to change to the mobile dental clinic and encompass the healthcare and education into our project with 3 mobile buses, 2 dental clinics, and the care of these people and education of their children. So I wanted to point out to everybody that had the courage and the patience to get to this point in the podcast, there's been a lot of misconception about the CARES Act. I don't know how many of you read it, but I want to be quite clear about charitable donations. The CARES Act provided increased tax incentives for charitable giving, allowing you to donate and save on your taxes. This is for 2020 only. Even if you take, whether you take an itemized or standard deduction, even if you take a standard deduction, the law allows you to make a cash donation in 2020 to a nonprofit like ours, which will send you a letter upon receipt of the 501k 100% tax deductible against your tax liability nonprofit. It has all the information you need and a letter thanking you to give to your accountant. You can do up to $300 per tax return and deduct it against your income. That's if you're standardizing deductions. If you are itemizing deductions on your tax return, which a lot of dentists do, or you should be doing, you aren't subject to the $300 limit for charitable donations. In that case, you can elect to deduct cash contributions made this year, meaning to 2020, up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. That means nobody should ever pay taxes for 2020. If you have made a profit and you are showing that you might have a tax liability, you can get rid of that tax liability up from the usual 60%. And this change is only for the tax year 2020, unless Congress extends it. And so what I'm going to ask everybody to do is get their checkbook out and write December 31st, 2020, which is yesterday, and write at least $300 or whatever you can afford to reduce your tax liability exposure come April 15th and put it to a good cause. not just for dentistry, but for the education of oppressed and brutalized people in an humanitarian crisis. To try to care for these people during a winter where they have no clothes, they have no heaters except what we give them, gloves, hats, boots. We are providing all of this, as the AGBU is. 100% of everything that you donate to the Paros Foundation for Viad Zor Mobile Dental Clinic will reach these people in its fullest entirety. Now, anybody who knows anything about charitable donations, March of Dimes, Red Cross, who's your favorite, Brett? I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to go with organizations that don't use the money for administration and salaries and things. So
they're all different, but on their websites, because of a law passed about transparency, there's never 100% of your dollar that gets to what the project is doing. There is 70%, anywhere from 30% to 70% of it that covers administrative costs, pays the people that do it. Everybody involved with what we're doing is doing it without being paid and for the betterment of these people. So, Brett, thanks for letting me get this information out. I can be reached at gratefuldental.com. My website, if you click on the homepage, COVID-19 tab, has all kinds of things about how much vitamin D to take, how much zinc to take to virus-proof your body, what kind of masks are appropriate, how to make a level 2 or better homemade mask, the differences between different masks. It talks about lots of different things, including our projects in Armenia.
awesome.
So if anybody needs to reach out to me, gratefuldental.com. If anybody wants to make a donation, parosfoundation.org. I hope that everybody can find it within their heart to help these Christians who are surrounded by people who would have them leave where they've lived for centuries. And as an Armenian who spent so much time with them, I can promise you they are not going to leave unless it's in a body bag. So let's try to make a situation where that doesn't have to be the solution.
Awesome. Awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much, man. Such an impassioned presentation. So grateful for you and all that you're doing to help other people. You really inspire me in that way. And I want to wish everyone who joined us a very, very happy new year. Jeff, thank you so much. Enjoy the day with your family. Parosfoundation.org. Make your donations. I've donated to them. I get that letter that Jeff spoke about in a hot minute after the check goes in. So definitely, please help these people. And Jeff, thank you so much, man. Happy New Year. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge today. You really just such a wealth, such a great resource for all of us. And so here we are, 2021. Let's make it great.
Hey, 2021, thanks for giving me a platform to tell people about some things they may not know about. Unfortunately, it hasn't got great coverage in the media, but I think it's important to recognize that there's people that are in need of help. They're fellow Christians, and they really could use our help, not just in dentistry, but giving back to dentistry. I think that there's no better feeling than to give somebody dental health that couldn't afford it.
Yeah. I'm with you. Beautiful.
21, let's rock it.
Let's do it. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks so much, Jeff. And we'll be talking to you soon. Sending love from Chicago, everyone. Bye-bye.